welcome back. Hello, Dennis.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I got a trivia question for you.
Oh, man, what is it?
Who was the last American president who didn't go to college?
Well, I thought it was Andrew Jackson, but...
It's Harry S. Truman.
And?
And what does the S stand for?
Do not know.
Nothing. He didn't have a middle name, so they just gave him an S and stuck it in there.
Dennis, you continue to amaze me with the information that sits in that head.
That's right, and it's getting older, so it's falling out now.
Well, it falls out into the microphone. It just keeps coming and coming. Well, Dennis Gibb joins us, president of Sweetwater Investments, financial advisors, investment managers, and financial planners. So, Dennis, you know, you bring some pretty good scope to the world news and events and what's going on and how that really can affect people. Talk a little bit about maybe what's going on in the world and how it can affect people around here.
Well, I think the first thing people have to understand is that what happens in one place today affects everybody. We're in what's called a macro world. So what happens in Greece, which has 11 million people, affects 300 million people in Europe and 300 million people in the United States. So you can't talk about isolated stuff anymore. So you have to think that one event's going to cause the other. So what you have to look for, importantly, is winds of change. I think somebody wrote a book called that one time, Winds of Change. And you're looking for events that are changing around the world that are going to affect what you're doing. And so there's a number of things you can put together, but I believe that sometime in 1999, the world in general went into what I call a secular bear market. Now, a secular bear market is different than a normal bear market. A secular bear market lasts for a long time. It lasts for 25, 30 years. And it's not caused by securities overvaluation as much as it's caused by changes in demographics, changes in politics, shifts in world power. The last bear market we had like that started in 1965 when the Dow Jones hit 1,000 for the first time. And it didn't end until 1982 when the Dow got back up above 1,000. In the meantime, we had huge changes in governments from basically center left to center right. We had companies going out of business. The Penn Central went out of business. Whoever thought the second biggest railroad in the world would go out of business? Studebaker went out of business.
Is that the car with three lights?
No, that was the Tucker.
Oh.
Tucker. Studebaker actually made some pretty nice cars, but they started out as a wheelbarrow maker, and they just never got beyond wheelbarrows. So anyway, there are actually Studebaker collector clubs in Seattle, and we're going to get hate mail from them, I'm sure. But anyway, it goes through a number of phases, and I think what we're in a phase right now started with the dot-com boom in the late 90s. Lots of wealth was created, and then when the dot-com boom failed in 2000, that money was looking for some place to go. So it went into real estate. And that started the driving force of driving the real estate up, which then collapsed into the financial crisis in 2008. Now, the reason it collapsed was not because real estate was necessarily overvalued. It collapsed because the banks had leveraged themselves up. They borrowed enormous amounts of money. And at the same time, energy prices started to go up because of increasing demand from the third world and from we call them emerging nations. I'm sorry now. The emerging world and high support. Yeah, I had to be politically correct here, right?
It's the first time I've ever heard you be politically correct.
Yeah, well,
I was surprised.
Wait, just give me a minute here. There was demand going up for energy from those countries and also from the developed world. As energy prices went up, the poorest countries could not afford it. So they stopped supplying capital. They started keeping their capital at home. That cut off the capital flows to the world's financial system. With all that leverage, they couldn't stand that, and so you had a financial collapse. Now, energy prices didn't go down substantially because at the same time the developed world was going down, economies were dropping off, the emerging world was taking off. Think about the growth in China from 2006 until now. Okay, so now it looks like maybe that's reversing. The European situation is at least quieter than it was. They put Greece kind of to bed. Spain is brewing out there, which is 10 times the size of Greece. Portugal is brewing out there. And the problem is with Portugal is that most of the Portuguese debt is owned by the Spanish banks. Then you have China slowing down. I heard the other day that there are 63 million empty housing units in China.
Wow.
And I mean, not unrented with people living in them or whatever. birds live in these places. That's enough to fill with 200 million people, and they're just sitting there not earning anybody any money. Now, I don't care what kind of country you run. You can't have that kind of capital investment sitting around without earning money, without there being problems. And so today it was revealed that for the first time in Chinese history, one of their corporations is probably going to default on its bonds next week, strangely enough on the 15th. So those countries are slowing down. The emerging world is slowing down because they were largely supplying stuff to China. This was also happening with resources. So in the immediate last couple of years, energy stocks have done real well because people have been selling resources and oil and stuff to the Chinese. All of a sudden, that's starting to come unglued, and energy prices are starting to come down. Also, we've got great new supplies of natural gas. So these are kinds of macro wins. Does this mean that the developed nations economies are going to start picking up? I don't know, but it's something to keep an eye on. We seem to be having better numbers in the United States from labor, unemployment and people working is going up. The banks seem to be in better shape. People seem a little bit happier in here around.
Well, when the sun comes out.
The sun does come out in Seattle, yes, it does.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, but those people sitting out there in 405 in that traffic jam aren't very happy, I can tell you that.
No, they're probably texting.
But yeah, texting, and they're probably used to it, though. Anybody who drives south at 405 in this town is going to be silly. Anyway, so China's slowing down. India, which is another big force, has got some real problems. Their unemployment rate's running about 14%. They have power shortages. They don't have enough water. They have sanitation issues. And they've been subsidizing things like wheat at a level that they can't let it go back to free market without killing their economy. And that's politically very dangerous. That's part of what happened in Egypt. And strangely enough, this is how bad it is. The Indian life insurance company, which is called India Life, actually had to bail the government out last month by lending it about $1.5 billion. So you've got that. You've got all that stuff going on. So
why is this not front page news?
It's too complex. It's too complex. I mean, and nobody got killed yet. There's an old saying in the news business: if it bleeds, it leads. So when there's riots and there's people dying and this kind of stuff, then you'll suddenly start seeing this happening. But it's just too complex. And people in times like this, they tend to focus on themselves. They don't tend to focus on the world. I mean, not to be nasty, but who cares about little brown people? That's what a lot of people say, and I disagree. Those people are going to be our lives. I mean, that's the future of the market.
So what do you do? I mean, you also talked about these BRIC nations.
The BRICS.
The BRICS.
It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and those are the nations. Those are the four big nations that were supposed to be driving the world.
So we talked China and India now. So Brazil is another big one. These are huge countries.
Huge countries. I mean, Brazil's got about a $4 trillion GDP. Ours is about $14 trillion, and they're going to have the World Cup down there. They're going to have the Olympics are going to be there. So it's a growing nation. Now you have a couple problems. Everybody knows it's good. Money has been flowing in from all over the world, which is causing inflation and causing Brazilian companies to get bought up. So the government now is trying to stop that flow of money. They have great resource development in the future, such as this subsalt energy production off the coast, but that's 10, 15 years away before it goes into full production. They also have been subsidizing various things. For example, they are a big factor in ethanol production for cars, but they have frozen the price at which sugarcane can be sold. So the farmers have no incentive to produce sugarcane because they can't make any more than a certain amount of money. So they're finding shortage of sugarcane down there. And that's causing a lot of sugarcane to be refined to sugar, which is depressing the sugar markets around the world and so on and so forth. And then the new president down there seems not to be as much as free market oriented as her predecessor. And that scares the daylights out of investors. And then, of course, there's Russia, which is, as Churchill said, an enigma wrapped in a riddle surrounded by mystery. Nobody knows what's going on in that country.
For years and years now.
Hundreds of years.
Yeah, it continues to be amazing with how everything, as you call it, this macro world, it is a massive domino game.
It really is, and one thing leads the other. Now, I do have some good news for you, however.
Well, that's good. Cheer me up, Dennis.
The residential real estate market may be poised to get its final kick in the teeth before it turns better. The banks have managed to settle the big mortgage suit that was brought by the attorneys general. This means that they are relieved of civil and criminal penalties for the criminality they did during the boom.
And they got off pretty cheap.
They did get off cheap. However, one of the things they did, which people forgot, is that while they were about to be prosecuted, they stopped foreclosing or shut down their foreclosures. They did some, but they didn't do them all. There's a lot of houses out there that are in foreclosure that are ready to go. I would imagine the banks are going to start foreclosing pretty quick here, and they're going to put that stuff back on the market, and that's going to depress prices. That's the bad news. The good news is it will finally clear the market. It will set a price at which people will buy. Down in San Diego County, for example, California, it is actually cheaper to buy a house than it is to rent one. And it's kind of gone upside down. So at this point...
It's in a lot of places. I mean, it's the same thing here even.
Right. So you have to start thinking when that starts happening, the rent-buy concept, if you can get a loan and if you can qualify, people are going to seriously start looking for houses. Now, this isn't going to happen tomorrow, folks. So don't go out and start buying real estate thinking it's going to go up. This is probably going to take a couple of years to work out. But it looks like this is the final collapse of the real estate market that's needed to be done to clear the inventory.
And so now so the other issue we've talked about is there is not a lot of inventory out there. So this may also start pushing enough houses for people to purchase, because right now it's hard to find houses.
That's right. Now, and of course, the bad thing for people who currently own houses is that when you have a foreclosed property in the neighborhood, it tends to depress prices of all the houses. So you have to think about this. I mean, there's going to be some more pain in the real estate market, probably. It's probably going to be controlled because the banks can control how much they foreclose and who they bring on the market. But you need to get to a point where these houses will clear the market, and you're not there yet. This may do it.
Yeah. Well, all certainly good information. We see the same thing on the mortgage side too. People are like, well, why are rates changing? Why are they up? Why are they down? And you say, oh, because of what's going on in Europe. And they think, huh? So it's really incredible to think of how everything is intertwined. And you start to come up with you talk about Brazil and China and India and Russia and Portugal and Spain, and how just diverse the pressures are on every market, whether it's real estate or stock market or bond markets.
You know, there's an old story about a butterfly flaps its wings in Africa, and you have a hurricane in the Caribbean. It is really close to that right now. You can have a small nation like Greece or Ireland or Iceland. I mean, Iceland's got less people than Seattle does. Seattle itself, not Greater Seattle. And they caused a huge ripple in the markets. Ireland's got 4 or 5 million people. Greece has got 11 million. You're talking about this, 3 countries have a population in New York City, and look at the damage those 3 countries have done to the world.
Yeah.
Think of what's going to happen if it was the United States that was involved.
Well, yeah. I mean, then you'd be talking. Well,
we wouldn't be talking. We'd be beating this out on a drum someplace.
Yeah, that's right. I'd be trying to figure out how to get vegetables to grow in my backyard. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us again. Dennis Gibb, president of Sweetwater Investments, on the kind of macro economy of the entire world. You know, he brought up a little bit on the real estate market here in Seattle, and certainly people are starting to buy. We've discussed the lack of inventory quite often. Well, we want to talk a little bit more about that.